Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Vikram Sampath. Vikram Sampath is a Bangalore-based historian. Vikram Sampath is the author of three acclaimed books. One is Splendors of Royal Mysore, the untold story of Odias on Mysore royal family. The second one is My Name is Gaur Jan, the life and time of musician, the biography of India's first recording superstar, Gaur Jan of Calcutta. The third one is The Voice of the Veena, S. Balachandar, a biography, the story of eminent Veena maestro, the late Dr. S. Balachandar. Vikram was awarded the Satya Academy's first Yuva Puraskar and the ARSCA International Award for Excellence in Historical Research in New York for his book on Gaur Jan. The book has also been adapted to the theatre as a play of Gaur, written by Mahesh Dattani and Vikram and directed by Dubey. Vikram was also the four writers and the artists to be selected by the Honorable President of India, Shri Pranab Mukherjee, as a writer in residence to stay at Rashtrapati Bhavan for 3 weeks in 2015. He is a visiting faculty of music and history at the University of Queensland, Australia, where he is also submitted the doctoral thesis in history. He was awarded the prestigious fellowship, visiting fellowship at Westinghouse College in Berlin, where he researched the early gramophone recordings of Indian music. Vikram is also part of several government committees, the central government's INB, Ministry Committee on Archives of Air and DD, Dr. Sam Committee on Archives, Karnataka Government Tourism Vision Group, Karnataka Knowledge Commission, etc., and represents India in UNESCO body, ISME, and he is currently chosen as one of the young leaders for the Aspen Global Leadership Program, and also would be representing India at the Australia-India Youth Dialogue in February 2017. He is engineer mathematician from BITS Pilani and an MBA from SP Jain, Mumbai. He is also a trained Carnatic vocalist and writes regularly for newspaper and magazines. He has established the Archives of Indian Music, India's first dialogue sound archive for vintage recordings, and is the founder, director of Bangalore Literature Festival. Today he will be speaking on investing in youth for the future. Thank you.
Yellariku Namaskara. A very good afternoon to all of you. It's indeed a great honor and pleasure to be here at Rotary. I think this is my fourth occasion to address various Rotary clubs in Bangalore, and to see such a large gathering of so many clubs is indeed an honor, and I thank Rotarian Purnima for really ensuring that I didn't skip out in the last minute. I have a very difficult problem right now. It's like a limited overs match, and the last batsman always has very few overs left. So between me and lunch, I'm sure, I'll try to ensure that I keep some of your attention on whatever I want to talk about. And we've had such illustrious speakers before me. So, of course, the title of today's session is Investing in Today's Youth. And I'm really flattered to be considered a youth by all of you still, considering I'm inching very perilously close to that average age that was quoted earlier of the Rotary Club as a whole. But then what I thought would make a lot of sense, and maybe some of those aspects could also be things that the Rotary Club as a whole could take on, is a concept that I'm currently working on in association with the Office of the Honorable Prime Minister of India, and the Niti Aayog. So the presentation that you are going to see now was something that I made to Shri Narendra Modi about a couple of months back. So of course some of that would be very much oriented towards the government. So I'll try to ensure those are petered down and we can see what are the things that we as civil society can do. What is really, sad is that a country like ours, which has a heritage and history dating back to thousands and thousands of years, one is, of course, we don't really value that history, we don't value that heritage, and most woefully, we don't even have something called a national cultural policy. We have policies for every other thing, but culture always comes the last on the pecking order for anybody, be it government, be it civil society, be it anyone. And we let monuments crumble, we let art forms die out, we let languages die out, but we really don't do much about it. And of course, we might become a superpower. We will surely become a superpower maybe in 30, 40, 50 years. The GDP may be 10%, 20%. It's very good. But what is growth without identity? What is it? I just came back from a trip to Sikkim. It was a cleanest place in India, some of the best kind of people. It's 100% zero open defecation free state, and probably the Swachh Bharat mission has really found its calling there. Our languages were different, our facial features were different, the things we wore and spoke were different, but still there is that intangible thread of Indianness, where we can't put our finger and say, what is it that defines Indian culture? What is culture? How does it affect people? It affects people from the minutest of things, of everyday habits, to the more esoteric, highest expressions of human creativity. Someone had said that if civilization is a steering wheel, then it is culture which is the fuel which drives that entire machine. And in fact, it was Plato who had said that the soul takes nothing with her to the next world but her education and her culture. And so considering the importance that culture plays, particularly in developing the minds of young people, I thought this was very appropriate to talk about something like this. You'll be interested to know that actually the Ministry of Culture for the longest period of time in the central government has been deliberating on creating one such policy. And in true government fashion, in 2007, there was a committee that was established of many eminent individuals who would come together and deliberate, saying, what is it that we would want to do? Now, for 6 years, this committee actually met over several meetings, and to all our horror, at the end of the 6 years and after several trips and several, hotel stays and everything, the committee decided that it took them 6 years to decide that it's binds, and I'm quoting that their media report, there is nothing common that binds a Kashmiri, a Malayali, a Gujarati, and a Mizo. And so there is no need for a homogenized cultural policy. So I think when we talk, so this was, so this whole idea of this culture policy came up, as was mentioned in the my introduction, I had the privilege of being a writer in residence at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and during that stay, the Rashtrapati Bhavan has a wonderful library, and a lot of policy documents of various countries were accessible there, and I was shocked, amazed that the smallest of countries, including those in our neighborhood, have such a policy, but we, with our huge size and the kind of history that we have, we don't deem it fit to have one such. And that was when I kind of discussed this with Mr. Modi, and he was really happy and decided to take this forward. Of course, it will take its own time, and the usual fears that come up with when we use the word culture, especially in today's context. There's always that fear that it's going to be a homogenized culture. So first, that's why the first disclaimer is it's not an attempt to either define. As I said, you can't define something like culture. How do you define something as intangible as Indianness or Indian culture? Neither is it an attempt to define, nor is it an attempt to homogenize the culture of a country which is as diverse as India, with multiracial, multilingual, multi-religious, and all sorts of ways. And it's not looking at a majoritarian view of culture as well, which is rightfully the problem and fears that many people have. So what this policy would probably look at how effective ways can be made to manage, promote, preserve, and showcase the rich and diverse cultural heritage of India, and coined this new term. Now everything is an industry. There's even a film industry. So the cultural economy or the creative industry as such is also something that needs to be looked at. And a modernistic view of managing ancient traditions, managing the cultural economy, as I said, in the best interests of all the stakeholders. And of course, being a perfect Gujarati businessman, I think Mr. Modi understood the fact that the cultural sector, when I said, needs to be a profit center and not a cost center which only doles out grants. You have artists who are going to various academies and asking for grants. So it's just become a body which gives away grants to so many people. But is there a way where through public and private partnership, the culture ministry itself and the department can be a place of interface between the people, the young people, and of course the government. So utilize to the fullest. I think what we have woefully and terribly lacked is to utilize the soft power. So there's something called, of course, the hard power that we have in terms of our military capabilities or our economic capabilities, our industries and all of that. But there's also something called the soft power of cultural diplomacy. And that is something that can be used for a multitude of things, for nation building, for job creation, for skill development, and also, most importantly, tourism potential and enhancing that. And I shall deal with all of these briefly. And the culture ministry itself, if you see in this context, it would actually be an interplay of several ministries within the government. So you would have the Ministry of Education, HRD, and Commerce, you would have the Ministry of External Affairs, you would have the Ministry of Skill Development, Ministry of the new Skill India and startups and all of that which the new government is talking about. So, and finally, creating an ecosystem where culture is seen for everybody. And it's not just for the privileged few or for the privileged elitist few, which is how it is usually perceived. So some of these things which are more relevant to the government, I'll probably quickly skip through. The Ministry of Culture in New Delhi has about 45 different organizations that come under its umbrella. So the Central Sahitya Academy, Sangeet Natak Academy, Lalit Kala Academy, Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, and a host of them. Now, what is very, very sad is there is no mandate for any of them, as in what each organization is supposed to do. And there is a lot of interplay and duplication of work that happens within them. There is a lot of vacancies that are there. People are quite frustrated, and usually the officers who are posted to culture ministry consider it as a punishment posting. If you want to punish somebody, an IAS officer, send him to the culture ministry, because that's also the place where you probably can't make too much money. So and you only dole out money. So that very mindset needs to change. Shocking statistics even from our own state, Karnataka, where as part of the Karnataka Knowledge Commission, I've put together this proposal for the government of Karnataka on arts management or arts administration. Can anyone guess how many museums would be there across Karnataka? Any rough estimate? 300? Okay, anyone else? Close. I mean, we have 15 museums. And can you also guess what would be the total budget that is allocated to these museums? Annual budget? Pardon? 10 lakhs each? Huh? We have 15 museums. So how much do you think each museum would be allocated annually? 30 crores. Wow. I think the Director General of Museums would be extremely happy. 15 museums are allocated all of 37 lakhs for a year. And the overall budget of the Kannada and Culture Ministry is 300 crores. So 300 crores minus 37 lakhs, I really don't know where the rest of it goes. But so most of these, heads of these museums tell in that meeting that we had a very extensive survey of these museum directors, and they said, with 2 lakhs average that is allocated, it's just enough to maintain that white elephant and the staff and cleanliness. So where is the time for us to look at new collections, new displays or outreach program to young people in schools and colleges? It's impossible. So that is one major problem. And also this whole attitude that somebody is a very good writer, somebody is a very good artist, no doubt. but they need not be a very good administrator. And so every other country in the world, there is a global organization called AAAE, or Association of Arts Administration Educators, where about 50 different countries come together, and arts management, museum administration is a course that is taught in universities, both at the postgraduate, undergraduate and diploma levels. Whereas we think, chal jayega, by itself, these museums and academies will run. First of all, they have no mandate, they have no incentives, there is no career mobility or growth pattern, and most of the employees are on contractual basis, so they can be hired and fired at will. So there is zero motivation for anybody to do anything in this regard. So the first aspect of a culture policy is probably looking at introducing a more scientific way of managing and administering our various bodies. And there have been thousands and thousands of committees that have been formed. If you see here, the Bhabha committee, which was formed in 1964, the Khosla committee in 72, the Haskar committee in 1988, and the high-powered committee as recent as 2014 by Mr. Abhijit Sengupta, who's from Bangalore. And he rules very sadly towards the end of that report that most of these recommendations that I am now stating are what have been stated in the 1964 report. And I do hope that, you know, my successor doesn't quote me and have the same recommendations, and I do hope that the government of India takes a look at these recommendations. So urgent need for restructuring institutions, as I said, eliminating duplication of activities, inefficiencies, performance audits, all of this need to be done in a very time-bound project mode. And in a phase 2, probably, you know, have an Indian Institute of Arts Management. If you have an Indian Institute of Science, of Indian Institute of Technology and Management and so on, why not the arts as a whole, considering that is one of our strength areas, that is one of our soft power areas. We have so much to offer to the rest of the world. So moving on, as I said, the biggest problem that the Ministry of Culture gets is in terms of funding. Here again, I'd just like to give you a few statistics. China, for instance, spends about 18% of its budget on culture, education, and science. The United Kingdom gives 25% tax rebates on orchestras, performances, any creative activities. It invests in establishing Wi-Fi in public libraries, museums, etc. And most of the European countries, they spend something like 1 to 1.5% of their total budget allocation on culture. And in UK particularly, you have something called the Arts Council, about which I shall talk about. But when I compare it with all these other countries, India, no surprises for guessing, we in the last budget, I've not yet looked at this year's budget numbers, but last budget, only 0.5% of our total budgetary allocation goes actually to the field of culture. Of course, roti kapda makan issues are very important. It is a matter that we ensure equitable growth. We need everyone to have a roof on their heads, health, sanitation. It is important. But till when are we going to wait for this to take a prominence? Till the time we would have lost whatever we have. So it's very important to probably follow some of the best practices that countries abroad do. So for instance, UK, the entire the budget for culture for 3 years is about 1 billion pounds. And in this 1 billion pounds, about 70 million actually comes through public-private partnership, where it is corporates, where it is individuals, organizations like yours, which contribute to a national culture fund of sorts. And the government's role in that is the other part, very, very minimal. And it is this National Arts Council which actually invests in about 664 arts organizations across the UK. So this is one idea that is probably going to happen soon, where we're looking at a national culture fund where people can invest in that, and it comes under the ambit of the CSR Act as well, so where donation to culture is not considered as a waste of money or a waste of time. And of course, giving tax exemptions and reliefs for donations to cultural industry and bringing it under the ambit of mandatory CSR. And also a lot of high net worth individuals and corporate entities could be encouraged to adopt and incubate specific projects. I know that this comes with its own turf of problems. We had one such in Bangalore itself, where when the Venkatappa Art Gallery was considered for adoption, there was a huge furor and hue and cry saying, you know, it's a sellout and so on. But then people also need to understand that the government doesn't have, one, the money for it. Second, it's not on their priority list. So if there are individuals, HNIs, who are really passionate about culture, I think they need to be invited. And I'm sure the Rotary could play a major role in something like that. The third aspect is very, very important, and that's where I think it touches the lives of young people of this country. It's been 70 years after independence, but then I think very, very little has changed when it comes to the idea of education in India. I'd like to take you back to the 1835-36, when John Macaulay first, started his entire, the campaign to introduce English education in India. It was to create what he called little brown Englishmen. To break the backbone, and I'm quoting him here, to break the backbone of the nation, spiritual and cultural heritage of India. And he says, a single shelf of good European library was worth the whole literature of India and Arabia put together. And he also says that the major aim or the motive of education in India is to create this class of babus, the scribes who would sit and take orders. He says, and I quote him, creating a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern, a class of persons who are Indian in blood and color, but English in their taste, in their opinions, in their morals, and in their intellect. And I think that is so germane even today, 1835, and now we are in 2017. I don't think much has changed at all when it comes to education. And then education, history, these become, political football that is played between the right wing, the left wing, saffronization, desaffronization, Marxist history, capture of all of that. And in that, I think what is the biggest problem becomes, what is it that we give to our next generation? I was recently talking to Mr. Rohan Murthy, who, as all of you know, has established this wonderful Murthy Classical Library of India. Now, he was telling me that when he was at Stanford and other universities, his friends from Japan and China and various other countries, they had something about their country which they had reason to be proud of. And he said, as an Indian, and as a very well-educated Indian who came from such a, progressive family, privileged family, other than just saying we are a very great nation, we are this and that, he really did not have anything quantifiable to say what is it that we can genuinely be proud of, and not jingoistic about, but genuinely proud of. In 5,000 years of our existence, has the Indian civilization not produced any knowledge in various fields, secular knowledge? Forget the scriptures, forget religion if that bothers somebody, but in the fields of science, in fields of medicine, in literature, whatever else, is there no knowledge that is there? How many people today can read those, books? So he in fact, one of the first books that he has digitized as part of the classical library is this very ancient Pali manuscript called Terigatha. Now, Terigatha is actually written, interestingly, only by women, women who could write in that age. I'm probably talking about the 3rd or 4th century. And these were all Buddhist nuns who came from various backgrounds. Someone was a queen, someone was a common woman, someone was a prostitute who then became a Buddhist nun. And all of them wrote their own poems about what their life was, why they were attracted to Buddhism, and what being a nun meant to them. So this entire text apparently is in a script of Pali, which has a Bhutanese script or so, which in the whole world, there are just 2 or 3 people who can read this script. So once they pass on, I mean, this entire knowledge of our ancestors is just going to go away into nothingness. And we are just going to sit here and be very content saying, Sare Jahan Se Acha, sing that every 15th August, 26th January, but then what about all of this? This is our heritage, which we need to preserve. And he says the kind of work that the Murthy Classical Library is doing of digitizing and making this accessible, translating that and making it available at very, very low cost to young people is making them aware of another era. And here again, he's looking at, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim. There's a collection of various, kinds of literature. So I think this three dimensions that of cultural education itself is, one is knowledge based, where you teach the child about the best of what has been there in this country and what is being created through attempts like this. The second is experiential, where you develop your own analytical and critical faculties through the arts. Worldwide, there's been lots of study, scientific study done to say that, if you teach a lot of subjects, say like mathematics and science, and which are generally hated by children, through, say, music and dance and painting and all of this, they pick that up a lot better. So is there ways in which we can redefine our curriculum where there is an Indianness in our education model, a secular Indianness, which nobody needs to fear about? And the third aspect is skill-based, where you teach the children to actually participate and create new cultural trends, ideas, and objects themselves. So this is, again, the fourth area where I think, again, the Rotary could play a very important role is in skill development and internationalization. Now, we have actually so many artisans across the country who produce some of the best of wares, but most of them don't get a market to sell those wares. And also, first of all, we don't even know what are the crafts and arts of each region. And that can come only through public participation, where we create a kind of an exhaustive inventory of all the arts, craft forms from every part of India, made with very strong regional identities. There are differences in methods of weaving, design patterns, dyeing, printing, painting, casting, metalwork, all of which needs to be documented, and the people who are doing that are dwindling by the day because they are looking at job opportunities coming down. All of them are migrating to cities, taking up work of a laborer or whatever else, and their children are looking at an IT education and so on, where the sustenance of their families is going away. So creating an inventory and also giving them those skill sets. It's very sad that the NSDC, the National Skill Development Corporation of India, does not have arts and crafts as one of the skills at all. So a carpentry and lathe machine, all of that would probably be a skill. But then somebody who's producing an art, a craft object, that is not a skill that is given in as a certification. So some kind of a curriculum, also certification, training, would not only give them an identity, sustenance, but also provide for our artisans global markets and export opportunities. So that is something that needs to be looked at, both again by the government and the private bodies. Coming to another very, very, very important sector, which is tourism. And here again, I'd like to give you, first of all, some statistics, because statistics always, most often speaks the truth. The international tourism industry in 2014 was about $1.4 trillion, which is like a huge figure, and over 1.16 billion people went around on tours and travels. Now, out of this, the top 5 countries, US, France, Spain, UK, and China, they accounted for almost 30% of tourist arrivals and 35% of tourism revenues worldwide. So out of the 1.4 trillion, you had 30% in these 5 countries and 35% of the revenues coming from them. And the US alone, due to tourist arrivals, it actually made about 15% revenues. In comparison, again, when we benchmark India, India got in 2014 only 0.7% of the world's tourist market. And its share in the world tourism revenue was a paltry 1.45%, and that's growing at an annual growth rate of just 10% per annum. With so many monuments, so many heritage places, with such a big history, a country like Australia, where I keep going back and forth with hardly anything, they managed to market it so beautifully. The US, with just 300 years of history, is able to showcase that so well. Whereas we are blessed with everything from the mountain ranges to the desert to the coastline to wildlife to monuments, history, temples, mosques, heritage monuments. The major faiths of the world are here. Still, this is the case. And India got less than even smaller countries such as Hong Kong, Thailand, South Korea, Switzerland, even disaster-ravaged Haiti, sanction-stricken Iran and Myanmar, drug war-torn Mexico and Colombia, Saudi Arabia, and even our neighbor Sri Lanka did much better than us. So here we are sitting on this huge gold mine, but unfortunately turning it into a landmine perhaps. So culture policies needs to also dovetail into a tourism policy where the two can actually be interrelated. And how could that happen? Through, of course, in every state, we have proposed that in every state create an inventory of at least 10 major tourism centers. And then in and around that, there has to be good infrastructure in terms of approachability of roads, just plain, basic, clean hotels, with internet connectivity, clean toilets, restaurants and so on, which would create a multitude of jobs. So the amount, it can account for 9% of GDP and 1 in 11 jobs of the country. So you can imagine. So this is what I meant when I said the culture ministry or the culture department being seen as a profit center and not necessarily only as a cost center. So the skill development, job creation, nation building, and creating a national heritage trust, just like what is in the UK, to promote experiential tourism. You could go to the Tipu Sultan's palace here in Bangalore and come out completely uneducated. Like there's nothing to explain to you what this place is, who built it. You have guides who probably don't know the truth or just quacks or whatever. So audio guides, so how many jobs would that create? How can we create technology and interface that? And how to bring younger people, particularly from schools and colleges, on tourism trips and so on, to make them more aware of this. I think Rotary should have, if they've not already had, heritage tours and so on, which kind of expose younger people to some of our great heritage and monuments. So at these places, like it is abroad, sound and light shows, multilingual audio guides, trained tourist guides, information and pamphlets, etc. And many places like, in Mysore, a couple of friends of mine are doing heritage walks, which are done by a public-private partnership model. The government is not there, it's just facilitating it, but it is more of the people taking over. And at all these important sites, it's very important, like what probably the Rajasthan model in India, where we have experiential tourism. A tourist who comes particularly from outside India would like to also immerse themselves in the local culture, the local cuisine, the local dance, and all other things, which would also provide a market for artisans to also sell their wares and create jobs. And referring more and more monuments for UNESCO listing. Once it gets listed there, a lot of money flows in for conservation, which of course is siphoned off in India. That's another issue. But at least there is money, and there's at least government can then not complain that we don't have the funds. The sixth element is conservation and dissemination. So bringing the best of international, I'm being told about the time. Okay, thank you. So conservation and dissemination is also very important. Our archaeological sites need to be established, that there's more allocation for that, government-enabled collaborations with foreign universities, and skilled professionals and training, particularly for young people, in the field of archaeology. And this has been a pet, project of mine for a very long time, a concept of a national audio-visual sound archive of India, where the audio, you have the gramophone, the spools, the tapes, cassettes, CDs, All India Radio recordings, videos from the National Film Archives, all of it to be digitized as part of this larger Digital India project of the present government onto one single platform which is completely and easily accessible to everybody, and make this very user friendly, especially the kind of language that the millennials understand, have an app for everything. It's so easy to create that once you have digitized it. So make it accessible, make an anthropological archive of various communities of India. The northeast of India itself has about 350 communities, tribes, who are dwindling by the day. Their languages are disappearing. And a recent report said about 250 Indian languages and dialects are going to die in the next 50 years. So if we can't do anything to promote that, at least let's capture a capsule of it so that our grandchildren are able to at least say that, Byari in Karnataka sounded like this, if nobody actually, speaks that language. And the apathy of the government is appalling when it comes to this. I, as part of the Prasar Bharati, archives committee, in the very first meeting, we had this grand announcement by this lady saying, we have about 1 lakh hours of recordings, etc., from 1955 onwards. Now, radio broadcast started in 1930, 31, around that time. So a lot of us asked her, what happens to the 1930 to 55? And she said, the same spool was recorded over and over again. And that's how we have lost, I think, a valuable tranche of pre-independence collections. Probably Sardar Patel's address to all the royal families of India on the eve of independence. All this was through Akashvani. It's just gone. And next year, in 2 years, 1955 would have crossed to 1970. So as we talk, I think we are losing a lot. Museums, again, I'll just quickly go through. I spoke about them. They're one of the most significant revenue earners for tourist footfalls. So the 5 most important museums and galleries in both London and Paris, they receive more than 20 million visitors between them. Just Berlin, which is probably as much as Bangalore, has 140 museums. London has 162 museums, and New York has 126. China has 100 museums opening every year, and India is unable to protect or maintain existing ones, leave alone start new ones. And all of Bangalore, you probably have about 20, 25 museums. And 95 to 98% of the museums in this country are government owned, with budgets, as I mentioned, being so paltry, where there's no point of even having a building like that. So not only for education for young people and a sense of history, I think museums also serve in giving a sense of pride and belonging. A lot of innovative and creatively curated shows, audio tours, all of this could be done, outreach programs to schools and colleges, and international collaborations, sister museums with, museums abroad. And major centers in India can have a museum district, which is very much similar to, what is, like Bangalore could have a space research related museum, or a museum being a garden city, something related to horticulture. It all need not always be history. So online curation of exhibitions through, again, technology. You have the Google Cultural Institute, which plays a very important role in curating online exhibitions for people. The 8th aspect, bridging the government and people divide in the field of culture. And I think that is most importantly where organizations like yours and all of us from civil society can help in a very big way. As I said, every city, town and village to have their own culture or heritage committee, where they create, an asset inventory of all the local heritage sites, traditions, knowledge systems, their indigenous knowledge, whether it comes in medicine or whatever else, private collections. And all of this can be achieved only through people's participation. And once we at least have that, so if there is a small village, they have a little museum which they all contribute and maintain. It's a museum of all the local heroes and heroines and achievers of that particular village or town. It's a lot more, they would have that sense of ownership of this is ours, and it's not that the government is keeping it and we need to go as visitors. So it's something that sense of ownership needs to come in. as I said, local level museums and archives, and more participation of the corporate entities and businessmen, and probably sometime even the foreign investment coming into this industry. The last aspect that I touch on is international showcase. And as I said earlier, I think I saw one of the speakers was Ambassador Nirupama Rao. We were talking about this just two weeks back about the soft power of Indian culture and how less it is used. I think the biggest example of that was this International Yoga Day, right, where we used a certain aspect of our culture to make something that the whole world sat up and listened to. So through the network of our Indian embassies and consulates, a regular dissemination of cultural artifacts of India, the best of performing arts and artists, visual arts, films, documentaries, and literature to be made and packaged and presented with elegance, style, and substance. And we had this concept of festivals of India earlier. I think that needs to be revived in a big way. Most of the chairs in universities abroad, Indology is studied, or a study of India happens in universities abroad, but it is shocking to know that we don't have a single chair or department of Indic studies or Indology in the whole of India, which is why I think, we even outsource the study of our religions to a Wendy Doniger or somebody else, and then once they create trouble, then we burn the books and ban and do all these stupid protests. But then it doesn't help when we are doing nothing about it ourselves. So as I said, like yoga, there needs to be recognition to, if yoga is ancient, so is our age-old traditions of classical music, classical dance, our classical languages and traditional knowledge. And these need to be, showcased as well. I conclude with the quote of the Renaissance man of this country of the last century, Rabindranath Tagore, who said, "Everything comes to us that belongs to us if we create the capacity to receive it." And I think the sooner we create that capacity, among ourselves, among our young people, and among us as a civil society, to respect and regard our heritage and not let it dwindle away. As I said, we might economically be a very rich nation, but I think with identity gone, we'll be terribly poor. And I'm sure none of us want our grandchildren to live in such a culturally poor country. Thank you so much for your patience.
To Sri Vikram Sampath, we have found in you one who has been able to serve humanity by your artistic representation of history as a guiding light for scientific and serious pursuit than the exact writing of history. Your books such as Splendors of Royal Mysore, The Unfold Story of Wadayars have won wide acclaim as one of the most definitive accounts of history of our heritage. We, the Rotarians of Rotary District 3190, salute your vision to make a difference to humanity and confirm this, the Serving Humanity Award on you at the 40th District Conference held at Bangalore on February 4th and 5th, 2017, signed by Rotarian Rtn.Ananth, District number 2016-17, RI District 3190.